The icy wind cut Ryan Westford's face as he shut the old wooden door of the Frosthaven Inn. The creak of the lock echoed loudly in the winter evening stillness. Snow crunched underfoot with every step, and the gray sky blended seamlessly with the earth, creating the feeling that the entire world had lost its color. The Frosthaven Inn had been built by his parents in a time when travelers still preferred cozy, family-run inns over impersonal hotel chains. Ryan remembered how his father had carved this very door by hand, painstakingly smoothing each groove in the wood. Now it was cracked and worn, much like everything else in the inn, but Ryan couldn't bring himself to replace it. He stood still, staring at the frost-covered windows of the lobby, behind which the faint glow of an old lamp outlined the contours of an empty room. The silence, once comforting and familiar, now felt more like a funeral shroud. He closed his eyes, listening to his own breathing, mingling with the sound of the wind, until his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. At the far end of the parking lot, just beyond the reach of the streetlight's glow, he saw a figure, a woman. Wrapped in a thin coat, she stood motionless, as if bracing against the wind's attempt to knock her down. Ryan noticed her hands tightly clutching her shoulders, her head bowed, as though trying to hide her face from the world. Instinctively, he took a step closer, raising his voice to be heard over the wind. "Do you need help?" She flinched, startled by the sound of his voice, and took a step back. I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice so faint that Ryan had to strain to catch her words. The woman looked exhausted. Her shoes were worn, their soles nearly gone. Her cheeks, red from the biting cold, couldn't hide the deep weariness etched into her eyes. She seemed like someone who had been walking far too long without rest. "It's too cold to stand outside," Ryan said gently, trying not to alarm her. "If you're not waiting for anyone, why don't you come inside?" She shook her head, her gaze shifting to the side. I can't. I don't have any money." A pang of sympathy struck Ryan's chest. That look, he'd seen it before. He had looked at himself that way in the mirror, a look of someone tired of fighting but too proud to admit defeat. "That doesn't matter," he said softly. "You look like you need a place to warm up. I'm not in any rush, but I promise you won't be a burden." The woman stared at him for a long time, her fingers clutching the straps of her backpack tightly. There was a struggle in her eyes, as if she were deciding whether to trust this stranger. "Thank you," she finally whispered, nodding hesitantly. Ryan stepped closer and gestured for her to follow him. She cautiously crossed the boundary of the light, her movements hesitant but slightly more assured with each step. When they entered, the warm air of the inn's lobby enveloped them. She quickly scanned the room as if searching for something, perhaps exits, perhaps threats. The old furniture and the lingering scent of morning coffee gave the space a homely feel. "What's your name?" Ryan asked, retrieving a key from the drawer behind the counter. "Anna," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Anna," he repeated with a slight smile. "I'm Ryan. Come on, I'll show you to your room." He led her down a short corridor to a small room on the first floor. It was simple, a bed with a floral quilt, a wooden dresser, and a small table by the window. A lamp cast a soft glow, giving the space a cozy feel. Ryan placed a stack of towels on the bed and gave a slight bow. "You can rest here. If you need anything, I'll be nearby. The bathroom's at the end of the hall." Anna stood in the doorway, clutching her backpack as if it were her only anchor. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. Ryan looked at her warmly. "You don't have to thank me. Just rest." As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Ryan?" He turned back, waiting for her to continue. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for an answer that seemed important to her. Ryan paused for a moment, then replied gently, "Because I know what it's like." Anna didn't respond, but a faint spark of gratitude flickered in her eyes. That night, for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt like his actions truly mattered. Anna Clayton woke up to the pale light of a winter morning seeping through the thin curtains. For a few seconds, she lay still, disoriented. The unfamiliar softness of the mattress, the warmth of the blanket, it all felt unreal, almost foreign. Her body, accustomed to the cold and the hardness of concrete benches, refused to immediately accept that she wasn't where she usually was. She sat up, feeling a slight ache in her muscles. the lingering effects of sleepless nights and long hours of walking. On the chair by the window was a neatly folded stack of towels Ryan had left. The small gesture stirred a wave of emotions in her, gratitude mixed with guilt. I don't deserve this, she thought, gripping the edge of the quilt tightly. Despite her doubts, she got dressed and stepped into the hallway. Her footsteps sounded louder than she would have liked, as if the world knew she was disturbing the peace of this place. The faint smell of coffee and toast drew her toward the lobby, and before she could decide whether to enter, her feet had already brought her to the door. Ryan was sitting at an old wooden table, engrossed in a pile of paperwork. He looked tired but somehow still at ease. When Anna entered, he glanced up and gave her a warm smile, as though her presence wasn't unexpected but welcomed. Good morning, he said, nodding toward the coffee pot. Help yourself while it's still hot. Anna hesitated, her fingers instinctively reaching for the straps of her backpack. I don't want to impose, she murmured. You've already done so much. Ryan set the papers aside and leaned back in his chair. We don't talk about who's done what here. If you're hungry, the food's yours. His calmness caught her off guard. She cautiously approached the coffee pot, poured herself a small cup, and added a splash of milk. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried it to the table. Thank you, she said softly, sitting across from him. How did you sleep? Ryan asked, pouring himself another cup. Warm, Anna replied, avoiding his gaze. I can't remember the last time I slept in a bed. Ryan nodded but didn't press for details. He knew some answers only came when a person was ready to share. For a few minutes they sat in silence, broken only by the faint hum of the heater and the occasional clink of their cups against the wooden table. You don't seem like someone who just opens their doors to strangers, Anna finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of doubt in it. Ryan looked at her, his face calm, but a flicker of emotion passed through his eyes. Maybe not, he replied, but sometimes you help because it's the right thing to do. Anna studied his face, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to ask a question she usually avoided. Why are you doing this? You have your own problems. It's obvious. Ryan thought for a moment, crossing his arms over his chest. Because I know what it's like to feel lost, he said quietly. To be on the edge and wonder if anyone even notices. When my parents passed away, I thought I could handle it, but everything got harder. Sometimes the only thing that keeps me going is knowing I can help someone else. These words, sincere and simple, broke through her defenses. Anna felt something soften inside her, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself share a little more. I used to work at a diner, she began, her voice trembling. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills. Then it closed down, and I was left with nothing. I tried to find a new job, but nothing worked out. Eventually, I just ended up on the street. She avoided looking at him, afraid of seeing pity. But when she glanced up, all she saw was understanding. That sounds awful, Ryan said. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. His words weren't an apology or an attempt to fix her pain. They were simply an acknowledgement that it existed. I didn't think it would come to this, she continued. I had a plan, dreams, and now I'm just trying to survive. Ryan nodded slowly. Sometimes life breaks our plans, he said, but that doesn't mean we can't make new ones. Anna fell silent, turning his words over in her mind. She wasn't sure she believed them yet, but something in his tone made her want to. Later that day, as Anna sat by the window, watching the snow blanket, the ground in an even white layer, a new guest entered the inn. The sound of the bell over the door pulled her out of her thoughts. A tall, well-dressed man removed his hat, shaking off the snowflakes. His suit was immaculate, his demeanor confident. Ryan rose from behind the counter to greet him. Good afternoon, the man said warmly. Do you have a room available? Anna, observing the scene, felt a strange unease. There was something unusual about him. Her instincts, sharpened by months of survival, whispered that he wasn't here by coincidence. She continued watching as Ryan checked him in, but the sense of unease remained. There was something about this new guest that reminded her the world wasn't as safe as it seemed behind the walls of the Frosthaven Inn. Ryan Westford observed as the new guest, Nicholas Blaine, settled into a chair in the lobby. The crisp lines of his tailored suit his composed demeanor, everything about him spoke of a man accustomed to control. Yet behind his polite smile, Ryan sensed a tension, subtle but undeniable. Anna Clayton, standing in the corner pretending to dust the window ledge, kept a cautious eye on Nicholas. Her movements were slow and deliberate, like someone trying to blend into the background. Her instincts, sharpened by months of hardship, warned her not to let her guard down around him. "This place is cozy," Nicholas remarked, breaking the silence. His voice was soft but carried a professional undertone. "It reminds me of inns I visited in my youth. They always had a certain charm." Ryan nodded, setting aside the keys he had been organizing. "Thank you. It's a family inn. My parents opened it back in the 70s. Nicholas leaned back in his chair as if weighing his next words carefully. "I've noticed places like this are becoming rare. You should be proud of keeping it afloat in times like these." Ryan chuckled lightly, a mix of exhaustion and self-awareness in his tone. "Afloat might be a bit generous. Most days it feels more like I'm fighting the current." Nicholas studied him for a moment, but said nothing, letting the silence linger before changing the subject. "And your assistant? Has she been working here long?" The question sounded so casual that Ryan almost dismissed it as small talk. But Nicholas's eyes were fixed on Anna, who stiffened at the mention of her. "She's not staff," Ryan replied evenly, though there was a slight tension in his voice. "Just someone who needed a place to stay." Nicholas nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. "A noble gesture," he remarked. "Not many people are willing to open their doors to strangers." Ryan didn't respond, only shrugged slightly. Still, a subtle unease settled in his chest. Why was Nicholas so interested in Anna? Later, after Nicholas had gone to his room, Ryan approached Anna, who was still fidgeting with the folded napkins on the counter. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Anna looked up at him, her eyes wary. "He knows something," she whispered. "I can't explain it, but he looked at me like—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like you're someone important to him?" Ryan offered. She nodded, biting her lip. "I don't know this man, Ryan, but something about him makes me nervous. Maybe I should leave while he's still here." Ryan shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "You're not going anywhere. This place is safe. If something happens, I'll handle it." Anna didn't reply, but his words did little to ease her worry. The next morning, Nicholas appeared in the lobby early, before the sun had fully risen over the snow-covered rooftops. Anna, carrying a breakfast tray from the kitchen, froze when she saw him. Her instincts screamed at her to keep her distance, but Nicholas gestured for her to sit. "Don't be shy," he said with a polite smile. "I'm just enjoying my morning coffee." Anna hesitated but knew that acting suspiciously might draw more attention than simply complying. She sat down cautiously, leaving the tray on the table. "Are you traveling for work?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. Nicholas leaned forward, his eyes studying her intently. "Partly, but sometimes I just look for places to stop for a while. You know, places where you can escape the noise and chaos." His words unsettled her. They struck too close to her own feelings. She quickly looked away, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. "It's rare to find places like this. Most people want big hotels with fast service these days." Nicholas chuckled, glancing at his coffee cup. "Sometimes rarity is exactly what we need. Something that stands out." The conversation felt like a game of words, each sentence carrying a double meaning. Anna said nothing more, only nodded and excused herself, claiming she had work to do. That evening, Nicholas approached Ryan, who was repairing a creaky step on the staircase. "You know, Ryan, this place is remarkable," Nicholas began, sitting on the banister. "There's something special about it, a warmth you can't buy." Ryan put down his hammer and wiped his hands. "Thanks. This place means a lot to me." "You did a good thing, taking Anna in," Nicholas added, his gaze thoughtful. "People like you are rare." Ryan tensed slightly but kept his expression neutral. "We all go through hard times. Sometimes people just need a little help." Nicholas nodded pensively, then stood and left without another word. That night, as the shadows deepened in the lobby, Anna and Ryan sat near the fireplace. She stared into the flames, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Ryan watched her quietly before speaking. "Anna," he said gently, What if he is looking for you? She didn't look away from the fire, but tightened her grip on the edge of the blanket draped over her lap. If that's true, she whispered, then I shouldn't be here. I don't want to drag you into my problems. Ryan leaned forward, his tone firm but kind. You're not dragging me into anything. If he knows something, we'll deal with it. But running every time you're scared isn't the answer. His words seemed to strike a chord, but she didn't reply. The tension in the room remained, hanging like a heavy fog. The next morning, Ryan found an envelope left on the front desk. Inside was a note from Nicholas. Ryan, thank you for your hospitality. You're an extraordinary person, willing to help others without hesitation. I hope to return someday. This place feels like more than just an inn. For a brief moment, Ryan felt a sense of relief, but it was quickly replaced by unease. Why had Nicholas left a note? And why did his words feel unfinished? When he showed the note to Anna, her face turned pale. This is a warning, Ryan, she said, her voice trembling. He's letting us know he knows, and this isn't over. Ryan looked at her carefully and nodded. Then we need to be ready. A week had passed since Anna left the Frosthaven Inn. Ryan continued his usual routine, cleaning, attending to the few guests who came through, and repairing the aging parts of the inn that had started to give way under the weight of time. But thoughts of Anna and the address Nicholas had left behind lingered in his mind. The envelope with the check still lay in the safe, a silent reminder that their story with Nicholas and Anna wasn't over. Ryan knew the address scrawled on the note wasn't just a random location. It was a clue, an invitation, one that promised answers, but perhaps also brought new challenges. One frosty morning, the chime of the inn's front doorbell broke his thoughts. Ryan turned, expecting to see another passing traveler, but instead he saw a familiar silhouette. Anna stood in the doorway, her face drawn, but her gaze determined. You're back, Ryan said, masking his surprise with a warm smile. She nodded, pulling off her hat and brushing the snow from it. I tried to leave, but I think I still need this place, she said with a faint smile, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Ryan led her into the lobby, set the kettle on, and silently poured her a cup of hot tea. When they finally sat down, Anna took a deep breath. I can't keep running, she said, holding the cup in her trembling hands. Nicholas left something for me, and I think it's more important than just money. Ryan nodded, letting her speak at her own pace. That address he left, she continued, I don't think it's random. Maybe there are answers to questions I've been too scared to ask. Do you want to go there? Ryan asked, watching her closely. Anna hesitated, as if afraid to admit it, even to herself. Yes, she finally said, but I'm scared. What if it's a trap or something worse? You're not going alone, Ryan said firmly. We'll go together. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Are you sure? This isn't your fight. Ryan smiled, his voice steady and kind. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to step into the unknown alone, and sometimes to face the past, you need someone by your side. 2 days later, they set off. The address led them to a quiet suburb on the outskirts of a large city. At the end of a still, snow-covered street stood a modest brick house. Despite its unassuming appearance, it carried an air of mystery, as if it held more stories than its walls let on. Anna hesitated on the porch, her hand trembling as it rose to knock. Are you ready? Ryan asked softly. She nodded, though doubt flickered across her face. The moment she knocked, the door opened. Nicholas Blaine stood on the threshold. You found me, he said with a faint smile, as though everything was unfolding exactly as planned. What do you want? Anna asked sharply, her voice taut with tension. Nicholas stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. Not so fast. I don't want anything from you, Anna. In fact, I want to give you something. They followed him into a small sitting room. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and framed photographs hung above a modest fireplace. Despite its cozy appearance, the room felt oddly foreign. On the coffee table lay a folder filled with documents. What is this? Anna asked, pointing at it. Nicholas sat down and motioned for them to do the same. Answers. Your answers, he said. I know you don't trust me, and that's fair. But hear me out. Anna reluctantly sat down while Ryan stood nearby, his gaze steady on Nicholas. I work for a charitable organization, Nicholas began. We identify people who've fallen on hard times but who have the potential to turn their lives around. You were one of those people. Anna frowned, her hands gripping the edge of the table. You've been watching me. There was anger in her voice. Not exactly, Nicholas replied calmly. You appeared in reports when you sought assistance from shelters. You stood out. Your persistence, your resilience. Even when you had every reason to give up, you didn't. I wanted to make sure you found a way back. And the check? Ryan interjected. Nicholas nodded. Yes, but it wasn't just for her. Ryan, your inn is important too. It's more than a business. It's a refuge, a place where people can start over. I saw that when I stayed there. Anna remained silent, her expression unreadable. But in her eyes something shifted, a flicker of realization. What happens now? She asked, her voice softer. Now you decide what to do with this, Nicholas said, pushing the folder toward her. The money is a tool, but how you use it will determine what kind of future you build. Anna opened the folder. Inside were recommendations, details of assistance programs, and resources to help her rebuild her life. Her hands trembled as she leafed through the pages. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, Nicholas replied. Just think about it. On the drive back to Frosthaven Inn, Anna was silent. Ryan didn't push her, giving her the space to process everything. When they finally returned, she turned to him, her expression calm. Thank you, she said quietly, for being there. Ryan smiled. You'd have done the same. Anna nodded, feeling for the first time in a long while that her life wasn't adrift. Now she had a choice, a path forward. And Ryan, watching the warm glow of the inn's windows, knew that Frosthaven Inn had truly become a place where people could start anew.